palms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive and you don't have to be afraid.
Welcome to the Bassline. Scott Austin is an accomplished professional dancer, an incredible masseur, and a passionate researcher. He's been a friend of mine for over 20 years, and I wanted to share his insights with you, the Bassline audience. It is my pleasure to introduce the Conspiracy Theorist Masseur, Scott Austin. How are you this morning? Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Jeremiah. Thanks for that introduction of
Well, let me just make a few announcements here before we get into this exciting discussion here. First of all, this is a pre-recorded episode of the Bassline. I'm going to be hitting the road tomorrow around the time I'd normally be on the air live. I'll be on my way to West Palm Beach, Florida for our Thrive in 25 medical freedom event that is being organized by my good friend and Stop the Shots co-host, Cece Blakeman. We have an incredible lineup of speakers. I'm going to be the co-host of this outstanding event, and I'm very excited for that. So, yes, this is a pre-recorded episode, and I'm very fortunate to have a good friend of mine here who is on the right side of history, I will add. But, of course, to support this program, you can go to my website, jeremiahhosea.com. Go buy a copy of the theme song of this program, Love's the Highest Truth, or check out some of the other music that's there. We have some original music from the New York indie underground, like Earth Driver's album, No One's Slave, or The Echo Effect by Sharif Simmons, and some other titles to check out at jeremiahhosea.com. You can also sign up for a chess lesson. I'm the founder of remotelearningchess.com. If you've never learned the game, I will teach you from scratch. If you have a young person in your family who could possibly take the time to learn, please sign them up. Of course, you get a Bassline discount. And of course, I would love for you to go to my Substack. Go to substack.com and type in Jeremiah Hosea, Jeremiah And please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack. If you can't afford that, then certainly become a free subscriber. But in the meantime, those are the ways that you can support this program. Of course, you could make a direct cash donation, but I'd rather work for the money in the form of giving you the audio that I produced, or teaching a chess lesson, or the labor I've done as a writer on Substack, where I published, I think, 28 articles. I'm about to publish something later on today, a really fascinating deep dive into a variety of different topics that will be released later on, probably this evening. But in any case, we have a great guest. My friend Scott is an all-around interesting guy. He's a great masseur. So I'm going to be plugging his business today. If you need a massage, definitely contact Scott. It's an awesome massage he gives you. It's not just a regular old massage. It's more of like a sensory experience, you could say. He uses heat, he uses cold, he gets right in there into the problem areas and helps get that blood flowing and get the oxygen delivered where it's needed. And it's a very healing massage that he offers. So I think most people enjoy a good massage, and if that is the case for you, you should definitely contact Scott, because he's an outstanding masseur, and I would recommend him to anybody. So you don't have to be injured, by the way, to get a good massage, but most people have an injury here or there, is what I've noticed. So contact him. Scott, what's the best place to reach you? We're going to mention it again, but I would love for people to have the information right up front in terms of if they need a massage, they need some of the physical therapy that you provide. How can they reach you, Scott?
They can just call my number or text me 212-874-2785.
Okay, repeat that one more time, please.
212-874-2785.
Right. So keep that handy. You should probably get yourself a massage, and it's also a great gift as well. So And I call him the Conspiracy Theorist Masseur jokingly, because his new setup is a little bit different. But in his old apartment, the massage table was in this room just full of books, and we would talk about all kinds of fascinating things. Maybe it's different for other people because obviously we're old friends, and we're interested in a lot of the same things, but we'd get into these fascinating discussions. So as I'm getting my massage, I'm also getting informed about all of this stuff from Scott's esoteric research and his vast book collection, which, by the way, that's not required. If you just want to have a quiet massage, I'm sure Scott will provide that. But since we're old friends, we'd always wind up talking, and he'd always explain some fascinating stuff to me while we were doing a session.
Well, you know
But
what's interesting?
yeah,
Can I comment on that, Jeremiah?
yeah, please.
You know, my brother's a chiropractic neurologist. He became a chiropractor in '83, and then he met Ted Carrick in the '90s, who's pulled 1,000 people out of comas and runs the Carrick Center out of Atlanta. And my brother would always say, "How do you get people to talk during the massage? Don't they just lie there and want to relax?" And I go, "Yeah, I have clients like that." But what I discovered starting doing massages in the '80s is that people wanted to know what was causing the sadness or the grief or the depression or the anger or the fear or the anxiety. And so many people like my brother, other people, they say they don't, they got families or this, and um, they don't have the bandwidth or the energy or the time to go into uh, finding uh, out all this information that's just so massive now uh, to discover, how we've been put on uh, uh, this duality or this. It's either or that this you can believe your truth and I'll believe mine. So people just are are constantly searching for you know uh, answers, really. So people started talking to me, and I just uh, was listening to so many things and researching and investigating that people in the last 40 years, they're like, "Scott, what's going on?" So I do have clients that just lie there and fall asleep, but quite often people want to know what's going on because it's connected to, um, their happiness and the freedom, just having this freedom of peace in the mind. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
absolutely. Absolutely.
It's
I
meaning
think we,
too also that it's the physical, the spiritual, physical, and the mental are so intertwined and connected. So what I find is there's a lot of talking heads that just aren't connected to their hearts, and so you can hear, you can pretty much find out who they are. But anyway,
yeah, absolutely. We all hold on to so much, right? The trauma and the stress, and that manifests itself physically. So
yeah,
there's
and they're
no doubt.
microwaving us every day. So it's like, how do you hold the energy of something? And what I find is so many people don't know how to discharge all this energy. And I say we're either a vibration, or if you've ever seen anybody die, in '99, my mom died and we were all there, my brother, my sister, my dad. When my mom stopped breathing, that body was no longer my mom. So we're a vibration or a soul or a spirit. And that um I met this healer in the '90s who said we have a spiritual, physical, and emotional body. Our physical body is our house, our emotional body is our garden. So he said you can pick up a seed or an implant like your mom's worry, your dad's anger, or somebody's hatred, and um, they
Cultivate that
they they
wittingly or unwittingly,
they
right?
sit in your organs, and
Yeah.
and if you a lot of people don't look at that philosophy. They just wake up every day and they do what they have to do. But what I've discovered is so many people, couples, friends, family now, they they don't know how to discharge this energy and thoughts and ideas, and um, everybody being triggered, and it's it's how do you navigate this vibrational, energetic landscape,
Yeah.
and in the search for the truth, a fundamental truth of something, instead of just us all just arguing and you know preaching to our cults. You know, does
The
that all
echo
make sense?
chamber, as they call it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah,
was
it's
gonna
very
say,
interesting, I mean, I don't want to get into the whole discussion, honestly, but you're reminding me of, there's been a little bit of controversy in my Stop the Shots group the past couple nights. Actually, last night was very chill and very upbeat, but previously a lot of feathers were ruffled. A lot of people were sort of upset by certain comments that were made. And, I don't want to try to explain the whole situation, but I'll just say it was interesting to me that people got offended, but most people didn't have the wherewithal to question the meaning of why were these words being said. It was more sort of jump at the opportunity to be personally offended. Whereas I think of, well, why do you say that? And I try to sort of find the inherent truth of what someone's saying, even if they expressed it in a way that some people didn't appreciate. But yeah, I try my best, and I guess sometimes people don't appreciate that, but I try to find the inherent meaning or value in people's perspectives. Sometimes it rubs people the wrong way. Sometimes people can understand where another person's coming from, and sometimes not at all. But that fascinates me, just that general theme of subjectivity in the human realm, how we just all have our own subjective perspectives and we can sort of overlap and interface to some extent, but in a lot of cases we're closed to each other's perspectives. We're not receptive, unfortunately, as well as we could be.
yeah. That's why I think when we had that discussion, and I said that I discovered through this healer friend who for 10 years worked on my clients, and he let me sit on sessions, and he would tickle people. And so I've been tickling people since 95. And what I discovered, he says that, the lungs hold sadness and depression, the heart holds hatred and patience, the liver holds anger, the kidneys and bladder hold fear, stomach, pancreas, and spleen hold worry and anxiety. So you have a negative quality of positive virtue, a color, and a sound. So I started tickling people, and I discovered that over 50% of the people I tickled, they would make a fist and say, "Stop, I hate that." And I say, "Well, do you ever tickle a baby?" And they go, "Yes." And I said, "Well, does a baby lash out at you?" Or no, babies just know love, joy, and gratefulness. But as we, like I think I was saying about vibration, and Greg Braden says over 50% of our body's energy comes from an unknown outside, outside source, and it becomes source because this our he says the emotional body is our garden. So we hold these things. So I would tickle people and they would just go, "Stop it, I hate that." And then 15% of the people would curl in like a turtle. 15% would laugh there and not feel anything. They'd say, "Oh, I don't feel anything. You can tickle me all day long." And I would, because the brain can atrophy your heart. And then 20% would laugh like a baby. So I would tell people, they'd say, "Oh, I want you to meet my husband or my boyfriend." And I said, "And tell me what his energy, his vibration." And I said, "No, just tickle him. And if he makes a fist and says, 'Stop, I hate that,' run away or know what you're dealing with. If it's a narcissist or whatever, but it we listen from our heart. We don't, I don't know what people think they listen from, but people aren't listening anymore. That, like what you were saying about last night, there's this whole, you know, um, myopic either or and the other. We just create the other, and it's just they only have two choices: good, bad, right, wrong, black, white, conservative, liberal. You're either, Bush way back. He said you're either for us or against us.
It's
And
funny
so,
about that statement by Bush that I always point out, and because I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm very interested sometimes in the phraseology of those specific statements by those people in power. And what's so incredible about that Bush statement is he didn't say either you're with us or you're against us, which would have been one thing to say, but he said either you're with us or you're with the terrorists.
Oh, yeah.
Like, really? I don't have any other choice in life, George Bush?
Well, they only give you two choices. So that's why people that don't have the time or don't look into this, like what I tried to do since the 90s is look at somebody's vibration and then share with them how to engage in an argument. Because I feel like most Americans have lost the ability to argue and debate and have a conversation. I mean, I watched this thing a podcast a couple weeks ago with Candace Owens and Cornell West, and they were talking about the death of romance and how my friend who's been in the restaurant business for 35 years and how people aren't talking at the bars anymore. You can't go and there's no flirting anymore. Everything's been, charged. And so you see people, my friend who's got a 16-year-old is like, this is people aren't having sex anymore. There's no romance. It's some of it's the phone, but it's how do I've been trying to share with people how to argue, how to have a conversation without making it personal, without getting triggered. And one of the big things is people think the outside triggers them. So they'll go, it was your words. And what I tell them is all triggers are internal. And so once somebody takes the responsibility that it's not somebody saying something or something from the outside, it gets back to that thing, your lungs, your heart, your liver. How does your emotional body play this integral role in being free enough so that you can sit and not catch the ball and throw it back to somebody? So, people that are just lazy, that, they, whatever they are, you don't get into this personal attack. I get into things with people and you can instantly tell in 2 or 3 volleys if they're capable of having a conversation or an argument without attacking with personal insults, and then they just cancel you.
I've definitely noticed that as well in discourse over the past few years. In particular, it is interesting where you're actually looking to debate a subject. Maybe you have a very specific difference of opinion on a subject, and then it quickly turns into a personal attack.
Yeah.
And I find that to be an
Yeah.
interesting phenomenon.
And here's a really important aspect of that, Jeremiah, is, and I tell people when they're talking about their friends and, oh, I've lost 90% of my friends, or, they go, Scott, you're the only one I can talk to. What's about? And because what happens is if somebody has I want to say people love me or hate me, or just think I'm this or think I'm that. And they don't, how do you understand somebody? So it's people have their peer group. So if somebody, my brother says I'm not linear, and so most people, if they go and say something, 90% of their family and friends are going to either pull them back into their cult, or or they're going to cancel them. And so what most people, they don't say anything. I get so few responses on my Facebook page because if somebody says anything to what I write, which may be inflammatory or very controversial, nobody comments, because if they do, they'll lose 90% or they'll get attacked. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So people do it for their own
Guilt by
self-preservation.
association.
Yeah, people they're lockstep in this group thing because their group will not allow them to go outside the parameters of what they've set up for, of what their truth and their comfortability in this political identity politics world that we live in now, where it's cancer culture. And I mean, can I say one thing, Jeremiah? Like, I have a couple of things. Like, two of my favorite quotes are, "You know it when you can teach it."
Yeah.
And if you don't know your opponent's argument, you don't deserve to be in the argument. So, and I always say, like, I used to massage all these lawyers in the 90s. And so there was this book, Jeremy Campbell's book, A Liar's Tale. And in the beginning, he says that the Clintons' lawyers' Arkansas brief to the Supreme Court in 1994, when they were going to be disbarred, said this. This is the Clintons' lawyers' brief, and they were lawyers too. So it says, many categories of responses which are misleading, evasive, non-responsive, and frustrating are nevertheless not legally false, including literally truthful answers that imply facts that are not true.
It's not true. That's confusing.
Yeah, so it's, you understand when he said, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman," that this is, to me, this lawyer's brief, the Clintons' lawyer's brief in '94, is is a is a is a little key, like the key maker in the Matrix. It's like that, how people this can't figure out truth or lies or obfuscation or and then so they get triggered and then they cancel. So we're in this whole and then their body is hurting, because hurt people hurt, so we see a lot of that now. So it's, how do you find
An interesting thing you said right there, because there's the saying, hurt people hurt people, meaning they go and
yeah
they spread their feeling, this injured feeling onto other people. But you said something different. Hurt people hurt. Meaning they have physical strain that goes along with the mental strain that's going on in their mind. Is that what you meant?
yeah yeah well, they hurt and they hurt.
They hurt others and they're hurt physically themselves. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But
And so
I wanted to get into that discussion that we mentioned a little bit offline, which is one of my favorite topics, which is this whole notion. I've written 2 articles about it that I'd love the audience to go check out if you haven't already, about this whole notion of the conspiracy theory and the conspiracy theorist. I wrote an article called Conspiracy Theory, What Do You Mean? And I wrote another article called Conspiracy Theory, You're Misusing the Term. And I just find it amazing, this usage of that term or those terms, especially over the past several years. And I mean, I'm not going to try to recap both of those articles. I encourage that the audience check them out. I think they're pretty good articles. But
yeah, isn't it conspiracy just two people doing something?
yeah, that's one thing. That's one thing I harped on, which is that why would you try to remove this very functional concept? Why would you transfer this very sort of practical, functional concept that's a very much a part of history and everyday life and pretend that it means non-factual? It's a misusage of the concept of a conspiracy. But then
Yeah,
the
it's
other
like
thing is, it's the only realm where the term theory gets such a negative connotation. We don't think that music theory is a bad thing. We don't think that we admire someone if they said,
yeah, it's
I'm a
just a word,
theoretical
Jeremiah. I don't,
physicist.
when people say or call me a conspiracy theorist, it's like the Hart's Code. I instantly see somebody who's lazy, and it's like, I go, could you argue this in front of the Supreme Court? You know what I mean? It's like when somebody uses the term anti-Semitism, like, you anti-Semite. What is a Semite? What you break down the word.
Palestinians are Semitic people, right?
Yeah, so these words are used to silence and shame and condemn, and also they're used as a mechanism because the person has just lost their argument. They can't stick on the point. Like, that's there's, like, what was that movie? Um, and they had a thing. It was Con Artist, and they said the person has a take, you know, and you can tell there's certain takes that people have, and you go, ah, there it is. You know, when people go personal, or, or when people use phrases like that to shame or to silence, it means they usually their argument is at the end of its road, or they don't they haven't prepared themselves to, I love listening. This sounds crazy, but listening to C-SPAN's uh, oral arguments before the Supreme Court. Now, how many people do that? It's really, really boring. But you never hear lawyers in the Supreme Court going, you know, you know, Your Honor, he's a conspiracy theorist, you know,
I
or
hear that nowadays. It's such a popular phrase, but
well, no, not when they're arguing in court. I mean, they'll call somebody a liar, but you got to stick to the argument. You got to stick to the argument.
yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
But it's
conspiracy.
interesting. I just think about that. I used to work on these lawyers, and I remember in the '90s they said it was the decade of the dumbing down of the juror. And I just remember in the OJ and Menendez trial how they said the person who won those cases was the jury consultant Joel and Dimitri, because it was about who they got on the jury panel. Because it's like the things that we're talking about is like, where's your confirmational bias? So
Yeah,
they would get people that have this confirmational bias, and then they're not going to listen to any facts or evidence.
interesting. Very interesting. So, um, you are very passionate. I would say you've put a lot of thought into, put a lot of research into the whole phenomenon of the HIV event, AIDS and HIV, and that was sort of Dr. Fauci's first big go round in terms of a national, even global public health scare. He was very much at the helm at that time, or he was a figurehead. He was, that was a big operation for him at the time. And then he's resurfacing later as our national health guru for the COVID event, where he was also implicated behind the scenes in the gain of function research and the patents and all this other kind of stuff. But before we segue into the COVID event, tell us a little bit about your background researching HIV and AIDS and some of the key points that you would like to impart on our audience. And I'll remind the audience that Scott was a professional dancer, and the dance community in particular was affected more than most communities by the HIV, AIDS phenomenon, crisis, what have you. So give us a little bit of your background with that discussion and some of the research you've done in that area, Scott.
Okay. Um, well, the interesting thing is I grew up in the Berkshires. I played four sports, and my junior year in high school, my girlfriend at the time, it, I grew up in Adams, and it was like 9,000 people, this small little town, and it was a jock town, but they had this little dance studio, and my girlfriend was a dancer there. And she kept saying, "Come and take a dance class." Well, this was 1974, and I don't mind. I mean, I tell this story. I thought only gay guys danced, and I always thought gay guys danced and played soccer because I played football. I don't know why I thought that. I was just a stupid kid. But I went and watched a performance and then took a dance class, and it was all these girls in leotards with no bras, and I was a 16-year-old kid, so I was hooked into the dance world. And within 3 years, I was in four dance companies up there, and I started competing in disco with my ballet dancer girlfriend, and we won a bunch of contests and got on this TV show called Dance Fever, and we went out to Vegas, and I ended up doing 13 shows in 20 years. And um, but what happened in '84 was I didn't, everything was physical. I didn't study. My brother and sister were really straight A's, and I So I didn't know anything about retroviruses or microbiology when my first friend died in '84. And, being a straight guy in a 98% gay community, I, having all my gay friends, most of them tell me I was going to get AIDS and die. If you remember back then, it was called GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency. And so I was like, okay, what the heck is going on? And I discovered Dr. Sanaben, who co-founded AMFAR, and he left AMFAR when they stopped using lifestyle cofactors and drug use and poppers. And then I met Celia Farber and that whole group of the reappraisal of the HIV/AIDS hypothesis that HIV was never isolated. And then I met Gary Null and Stefan Lanka and the Bowers and all these people that were that had a whole different explanation. So I don't remember any other dancer. I mean, I know Pam Everett now says that she was on board. She knew this back then in the '80s and '90s, but I was. I just remember I was the only one screaming out in not screaming, but just there's no HIV. And I mean, I can say to this day, I've had 44 gay friends that were murdered by AZT. I haven't had one female or heterosexual male friend be diagnosed with HIV/AIDS since this whole HIV psyop happened. And it's interesting. My girlfriend went into the whole cabaret scene. So she got the MGM show, she got the Trop show, she did the Lido in Paris, and she died in a horrible scuba diving accident in 2012. And I talked to her partner of 26 years, who was this straight 6'4" guy, and he danced in that field for 26 years. And we started talking, and I said, listen, Sean, can I just ask you, this was when David Crow was interviewing me on his Infectious Myth podcast in 2014. And I said, Sean, look, you're a straight guy in the cabaret scene in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s and 90s. What was your experience with HIV/AIDS? And he said he had over 100 friends, all gay. So he had the same story as me. And wherever I went, I was in countries in the 80s and 90s doing tours. It just the same story. And so the more I learned, the more I was able to, articulate my argument. So when COVID came along, and getting back to being called a conspiracy theorist, what do you mean there's no HIV? Well, what is all these people dying of? And I say, the same thing as COVID. It was AZT, and all the diseases. You just clump all the diseases together and call it HIV/AIDS, and that's why look who they targeted. And with COVID, they sort of used the same playbook. I mean, Fauci, Redstone, and who was the other woman there? They were all part of Gallo's team.
Deborah Burks.
Was it Deborah Burks? Yeah. So it's what the saddest thing is, nobody learned anything from the HIV psyop. But and it's interesting now with the whole COVID thing, all these HIV commercials have come back out now. So like you're watching the commercials, and it's like every third commercial is an HIV commercial now. So and the whole, it's just so sad. So it's, I when the COVID thing started, they had a CDC website for provisional COVID deaths under 18, and there's 24% of the population are under 18, they say. So that's 83 million. And so they had, you could just look at the government statistics, because if you usually had any argument, conversation with COVID, people would instantly start attacking you. What do you mean there's no COVID? What do you mean you can't catch a virus? There's no virus. And I say, well, just look at that. There's 83 million kids under 18. This is from the CDC and the government. This isn't some Trump conspiracy theory. And I said this back in the beginning, there were like, 300, 400, 500. And in December of 2021, the CDC had to admit the like 700 or 800 COVID deaths under 18, the two underlying conditions were leukemia and cancer. So those 700 or 800 deaths, they died of leukemia and cancer, and then they were given a PCR test and told it was a COVID death. So when they stopped this provisional COVID CDC site like a year and a half ago, there were 1,700 deaths out of 83 million kids under 18. So I tell people, they say, oh, the COVID. I said, or they say, oh, it was weaponized out of Wuhan. I said, I said, well, if it was a bioweapon, why weren't there any deaths under 18 of the 83 million kids? Why is it 90% over 70, 75 years old with 2 to 4 comorbidities? So you look at HIV, and they did the same. It's kind of the same playbook. They, instead of AZT, they gave the people, they said if you went into the hospital, they would ask people if they were vaccinated or unvaccinated. And if you were vaccinated, you were sent to the left. If you were unvaccinated, you were sent to the right, and you were put on a ventilator or given remdesivir. And so if somebody had COPD or asthma or diabetes or any number of things that can kill somebody over 75, they were put on remdesivir. So I would say the remdesivir is the AZT of this thing. And then my friend, who was the respiratory therapist at a nursing home here, she said back in 2020, they went to, she said, we got to go to the administrators and the doctors. And she said, if you put these elderly people on respirators, you're going to kill them. And well, everybody knows what happened with that. And just blew people's lungs out. So you go, okay, did they die from this COVID virus that was weaponized out of Wuhan? Or was it the remdesivir and ventilators, or just how they were being treated? They say most people that die from cancer, 90% of them die from the chemo and the radiation. So, and then also like HIV, I'm just going to tie this in because this is one of the big thing I learned with HIV/AIDS. This placebo, nocebo. And so I would say, well, there's nocebo also, because placebo means we shall please, nocebo means we shall harm. So back in the 80s and early 90s, it was HIV was a 3 to 6 month death sentence. And I had 2 gay friends, their lovers died, and their doctors told them without even an HIV test that they had 3 to 6 months to live, and both of them died. So you say, oh, did they die from the HIV virus? No, they had even tested negative, although the tests are completely bogus. But they still died within 3 months, because it's like you get they say you have cancer, you have 3 months to live. My mom was diagnosed with leukemia in 1999, and the doctor in front of us, the oncologist, said, my dad said, what does that mean? And the oncologist said, your wife has 10 weeks to live. And my mom died in 11 weeks. So I call that nocebo. So people, they say, you have this and you're going to die. And so if you're 70, 75 years old and you're told something, you have HIV, you have COVID, it's the psychoneuroimmunology, that whole aspect of it, of how strong our flame is in our lives when we get older. And they kept saying a pandemic, and it spreads, and then they started isolating people. So elderly people had nobody. They had to look at their relatives through a window. It's maddening. So anyway, I just went all around and up and down and with that. But so I was lucky in the 80s and 90s, being a straight dancer, to being one of the, I don't remember anybody else saying what I was saying in the 80s and 90s about HIV, that was never isolated, and what just lifestyle cofactors, drug use, and poppers. And then, if you got hepatitis, or Gary Knoll did a whole thing in his book, AIDS: A Second Opinion. And he said by 1987, when they first finally said HIV was caused from receptive anal sex, because prior to that, if you remember, they was like, was it kissing? Was it tears? Was it saliva? Was it a toilet seat? Was it a swimming pool? How could you get HIV? I remember that guy was on the Oprah Winfrey show when he went in the gate when he's in a swimming pool and everybody freaked out. So finally in 87, they said it was receptive anal sex. And Gary Null did a whole thing and he said, uh, in the heterosexual community, they say 10% modestly of heterosexual women engage in anal intercourse. And he said, so age 17 to 55 heterosexual women, that was 8.1 million women. And there was no AIDS in that risk group. So he said, why is receptive anal sex in the heterosexual female community different than uh, in the gay community? And when you look and you say all the drug use that it was the drug use and the prophylactics and the number of sex partners anally. And so there were so many different nuances that that uh, were part of this whole HIV AIDS psyop package that for you to unwind and articulate to people in a cohesive argument about well, what did the people die of if they didn't die of HIV and there's no virus? And so the COVID thing it was quite easy for me, and yet very few people listen to me or now Tom Cowan. I mean, there's another, and all the whistleblowers that were silenced, all the nurses, all the journalists, all the scientists, all the people that I knew that were when they had the Twitter files and Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi were in the C-SPAN hearing, and you saw what the government did with the biotech, colluding with the biotech companies to silence all these people that were saying exactly what's come out now. I mean, there's no apologies for what they did, and you got all the sudden death and myocarditis and blood clots and um, the spike protein, although I'm a little wary of the spike protein because I think maybe the spike protein is similar to the HIV. What is, I was watching Tom Cowan talk the other day about the spike protein thing. Like, is there really a spike protein or is it what is the reaction? It's interesting that, they called HIV an epidemic, and they called COVID a pandemic. And then with HIV, they said, oh, if it didn't explain the HIV diagnosis, they said, oh, the HIV has mutated, but they never said COVID mutated. They said COVID has variants. So I love talking about the HIV COVID, how they had to change up the terms in the dialogue in the test. HIV, they had the ELISA test and the Western blot. And Fauci and Gallo both said the Western blot was definitive, but in 93, I think it was, England stopped using the Western blot because they said it wasn't sufficient. They did the double ELISA, but you see now that all they do is the PCR test. And if you've seen what Carrie Mullis has said about the PCR test, and Stephen Lanka said the PCR test, if you can take a swab on your kitchen floor, and if you do 40 threshold cycles, you can call it anything. That's why the president of Tanzania, Magufuli, was taken out because he did that. I think it was 2020. He tested a pawpaw, a goat, and a can of oil, and they came back positive. And he was like, he did a press conference and said, how does a pawpaw and a can of oil and a goat test positive for COVID?
He was an MD, by the way.
It's well, he's dead.
Right, but I'm just saying he also had a medical background. He
Yeah,
wasn't just
he
the
was a
president; he was a
scientist.
doctor.
Yeah. And so I'm sort of lucky because I have a photograph. I say I have photographic memory, but I just have files and files and files and files. And most people who I speak to, they don't have the bandwidth. And I ask them, I say, do you know what you're talking about? And usually they don't go into this argument because energetically and vibrationally they can't like the thing I was saying about their peer group, they can't even entertain these thoughts. So that's why it all seems like a conspiracy for them. They can't go down the rabbit hole, and their capacity to have a conversation longer than, I send people a couple paragraphs and they go, "Oh, I can't read that. Can you just condense it? Just tell me the nuts and bolts." And I go, "What? They we how do you have a conversation with people now where it flows in and out without somebody getting triggered by a word or a or a or a disagreement?" So
Funny one for me is when people, even people who fancy themselves as rather sophisticated and they're college educated and whatever, and then sometimes I've been accused of, oh, you think that what you're saying is so great because you're using fancy words. And I'm like, they're just words. Look it up in the dictionary. Like, what did I say in particular that was so fancy? I might have used a kind of a fancy vocabulary word here or there, but
yeah,
just look it up in the dictionary. I think if you look up, or if you read an article in a good periodical or whatever, you're going to probably come across a few words that you're not perfectly familiar with. You can improve your vocabulary every day. So I just find that funny. People who are educated, who graduated and might have bachelor's degrees or more, accusing people of using fancy words. It's like, what are you talking about? You went to school, right? You got your fancy degree on the wall.
yeah, Jeremiah, one of the books in front of me here is Expert Political Judgment, and these two guys wrote this amazing book. And I mean, just they use this prototype, the hedgehog, and the wait, what is it again? Prototype of the fox and the hedgehog. But they went back 30 or 40 years in all these political decisions and judgments, and they from these experts, and they use like 3 or 4 different criteria: if what they said was true, if what was their affiliation or bias, and if they were wrong, did they correct it? And they concluded uh, that they're no better than a dart throwing monkey. So if you look at Fauci and you look at these people, when you get this information, when I started getting this information in the mid 80s, and luckily I stuck with it because I was told I was going to die. And all my gay friends who went on the who took the poison. I mean, ACT UP was begging, give us AZT, give us a. When there are two groups, the ACT UP, half of it branched off into TAG, Treatment Action Group, and they were a perfect group to target because I remember watching this debate with Larry Kramer and the gay prostitute drug addict guy. What was his name? And they were saying, Larry Kramer was saying, we can't go back in the closet. And I think it was really strategic for them to use and target the gay community. But just look who they're targeting, and so yeah, there's so many components of it. What I like about our conversation here is that we're not so much talking about the argument, is it this or is it that. It's more about what I share with people is how to argue and how to not catch the ball and throw it back, and how to discharge this energy that this energies of these things that we're all being bombarded by.
Kind of interesting in terms of the whole landscape in terms of the COVID event. And I'm going to write an article about this soon. But there just remains a number of very fundamental unanswered questions. So I just find that interesting to call someone crazy about something. Well, we don't know what's going on. And a lot of the time people will say, oh, that's crazy that you say X, Y, or Z. And then they just insert their own theory that's actually just as far-fetched as what you dismissed as crazy.
Yeah. And also the answers are many of the answers are there, Jeremiah. People just don't know who to trust. They don't have the correct sources, and they back the wrong horse. And once you go with those solid choices, it's very hard for somebody to come out of that. and just go and change. If you're a Knick fan or you're a Laker fan, and Ron Artest punches the other guy on the other team in the face and is a big, a-hole, all the Laker fans are still going to like Ron Artest. I remember when he hit, was it Harden in the face? He elbowed him and he got evicted, and all the fans were high-fiving him, and he could kill somebody, and the Laker fans would, you got the Celtics and the Knicks. I mean, so that's what it is. It's we everybody is on their own separate their team, and what I've been trying to do the last 25 years or since the 90s is share with people how we're all being targeted. They want us on our separate teams, so we aren't unified. And the reason why is because it's multifold. They don't have to do the work. I discovered this with the HIV/AIDS thing in the 80s and 90s. Is I said, look, it's not the CEOs, it's not the government, it's not the president. The enemy, our enemy of truth and solutions, are our friends and family.
Yeah.
And it's been really difficult over the last 40 years for my friends to swallow that. But it's there was Alex Gibb, he did a documentary, Why We Fight. I think this was like 2007, and he showed this Vietnamese woman in a military facility in North Carolina, I think, and she was pushing these huge big bombs. And he said, don't you find it ironic that you're Vietnamese and you're pushing bombs that are going to go kill other civilians when we bombed in what we did during Vietnam? And she says, hey, I got 2 teenagers that I got to get through college.
Yeah, exactly.
And so,
sort of like what the drug dealer says. They say, if you don't buy it from me, you'll buy it from someone else. So,
yeah. So how do we get, it gets back to me. This is my thing, is how do we get people to listen? You get people to listen through the heart. And so I'm lucky I made a list. I know it sounds silly. My brother's like, you got a list? But I have like 51 people who I can talk to, like you, who don't get triggered. And many of my friends only have me. They can't talk to anybody because all their friends and family, if they go there, they just get triggered and it explodes, and they don't want to lose their family and friends. So this to me is talk about the death of romance. This has been set up as part of the psyop to, keeping us confused and manipulated and indoctrinated. And so you go and say something and it instantly triggers and inflames somebody because they're in it and they don't know how to get out of it. And they think you saying, like, if I go and say something, then I'm worse because it makes me seem, they think like I'm like Trump because nobody's backing down anymore. It's like Roy Cohn, never concede, never apologize, double down.
Bits of powerful men kind of doctrine.
So my thing is, trust your sources. Who are your sources? Who do you listen to? And then, we gotta fight this fight together. I tell people, one of my clients brought me to the closing show of the last show of 1984. This was in 2017. And I mean, pretty much many people, I mean, of my generation, I'm 68, read 1984 when they were in school. Did I tell you this story, Jeremiah, about 1984?
No, we're actually running out of time, and I wanted to ask you about one other thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Time flies when you're having fun. I always enjoy talking with you, and we're almost near the end of the hour here. I wanted to ask you, in terms of, of course, I'm the host, the nightly host of the Stop the Shot space on X. And, I've seen a lot of carnage in terms of meeting vaccine injured individuals who've had their health completely ravaged by these shots. And I follow Mark Crispin Miller's Substack, where he's keeping track of just an unbelievable amount of injury and death, particularly among relatively young people, sudden deaths, a lot of different things that we could point to as far as strange features of this new era. For example, no cause of death in obituaries. Cause of death used to be standard, and now you're regularly seeing obituaries saying cause of death unknown or something to that effect. And I see just in my own everyday life an unusual amount of injury, heart injuries, cancers, so on and so forth. Could you just give us a quick, and I hate to say quick, but especially for such a serious topic, but we're running out of time. Can you just tell us from your perspective, just a survey of some of the harm that you may have seen? How do you think these
Well, I
shots have
talk to
affected
cab
people?
drivers. I
Yeah,
talk to cab drivers, so 2 or 3
there you
times a
go.
week going to clients,
Mm.
and most of them are from Senegal or West Africa or Bangladesh, and for the last 5 years, that's what I do. I get in. Now it's a little different. Now it's more about Palestine and Iran. But I would ask them about the COVID. This was in 2020, 2021, 2022. And I mean, I've talked to at least 100 cab drivers that were, 20, 30, 40, 50, who were healthy, got the jab, and now they got health problems. And that's really sad because these people are they had to get it to keep working. But you look at Portugal. Wasn't Portugal the most vaccinated country on the planet? And they have 20% increase in excess deaths. So it's that's why to me HIV/AIDS was so important, and that people didn't learn to for 200 million people to go take this experimental and trust these people because they didn't learn a lesson. It's like Tuskegee. Oh, let's go just give everybody the syphilis and not tell them. It's yeah, I've met a lot of people who are vaccine injured, and I can't go, I told you so, and there's no apologize. They wanted us, Jeremiah, they wanted us to be vaxxed.
Yep.
They wanted us dead. Same
Yeah.
thing with the HIV/AIDS people. They they were saying, you're going to die of AIDS. You're going to get AIDS and die. There's no, and it's hard. It's hard. You got to go back into the heart. Do you have a heart for these people who wish you took this jab that's now caused all these blood clots and myocarditis and sudden death? And that's what they were wishing on us. You see Jimmy Kimmel and these people and Stephen Colbert and these, I mean, there's thousands of them. Rachel Maddow. I mean, all these people, they're satanic to me. They're satanic. And they have a lot of supporters, and those supporters are our friends and family. So it's monumental, Jeremiah. You with your show, I don't. The thing is, you have such a big heart, so your heart holds it together, you know. But we need a new dawn of the God Hearts Code, and some people are getting it, but they could throw out another thing this next month, and 3/4 of the country is not gonna get it or learn anything. Um,
We're the drum in general. But yeah, I want to thank you so much, Scott Austin. Please tell us one more time, how do people contact you to get one of your spectacular massages?
um, my number's 212-874-2785. And like I say, I don't, I started doing massages. My brother got me my first table in 1982. So I was lucky in the 80s and 90s. I mostly worked on dancers, but I just had a 98-year-old client. And so I'm lucky I can fix things, or help, I'm
Help
more like
put
a
things back in
therapeutic.
alignment.
Yeah, well, it's, I do the trigger point stuff. I use ice and heat because I lived in Japan for years. So I've been going to the Russian baths since '99, and I use the ice and heat to flush and contract and expand. And I do cupping, and I do a lot of different things that are, I mean, I can do just a simple therapeutic, massage too, but my expertise is really deep tissue sports, corrective therapy. And, I don't have to talk to people, but if people, what I try to share with people is exactly what you and I didn't get in one fight or disagreement or get triggered. This is how it should be, Jeremiah. You know what I mean? We have a conversation, you throw out ideas and evidence and facts, and then you have a debate, an argument, and a conversation.
Yeah, I think it starts from a sense of self and self-esteem, even to some extent, not being subject to humiliation.
Well, it's
Um,
it's
there's
the
a lot.
heart. You have
Yeah,
to be loving, like an open vessel,
yeah,
and we're not the enemy.
yeah.
It's
Yeah, absolutely.
the
Well, I want to thank
conversation, the
you, brother.
argument.
I have to close this session because
All
we're
right.
just
I
over
hope that went
time. I
well,
think.
Jeremiah. I
Oh, it did, man. I enjoy talking with you, and I think people will appreciate your perspective. And I strongly encourage you, my audience, to contact Scott for a massage. You'll feel like $1,000,000
Oh,
afterwards.
Jeremiah, thanks so much.
No,
Thanks so
absolutely.
much. You're
Yeah,
a dear person, and you care. You can't care if you don't listen, and you can't listen if you don't care, and that
yeah,
comes from the heart, not the brain. And so you're quite remarkable in that. As long as I've known you, you have such a kind heart, and that's what we need to
appreciate
come
that.
back to. It's not all these facts and arguments and fights and triggering. It's because we're all being attacked by this stuff.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know.
thank you, Scott Austin. Have a great day, and hope you got some. I'm sure you have some lucky clients lined up for today. I'll
Well,
talk
that
to you
would be
soon,
that
brother.
would be nice. I love people. All right,
Yeah.
man. Thanks, Jeremiah.
Thank you.
When you walk with open arms towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know the truth, and the truth is love, yes it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learned from a book or from the news. It's not like that, 'cause it's a thing. It is something that you do. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Dib on baby did long. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Dib on baby did love's the highest truth. Nothing could be higher than love, my friend. Love's the deepest truth. Nothing could be deeper than love, my friend. When you stop and you take the time just to think about your life, you'll recall the ones you love and the ones who were always there for you. Better thank those friends better. You better make amends, go and tell them now, yeah. Tell them what they mean to you.